These 10 days are our most sacred holiday period when Jews fast, pray, reflect, and supplicate to God. Yet everywhere, Jewish leaders and publications are warning Jews to be cautious and alert in the event of terrorism. It has become a sport by anti-Semites to schedule contentious events on the Jewish high holy days, innovated best by the Jew haters connected to the Burlington City Council.
And now, The Edwin Black Show. Sponsored by the Books of Edwin Black, available on Amazon and at booksellers worldwide. And now, here's Edwin.
Welcome to the Edwin Black Show. I'm Edwin Black, investigative journalist, historian, and author of IBM and the Holocaust, War Against the Weak, and the Farhud, and numerous other books in 200 editions in 40 languages in 190 countries worldwide. If you like our show's content, spread the word. You can subscribe for alerts at theedwinblackshow.com. And if you want to support our work, please visit theedwinblackshow.com/support. Your help, big or small, assures our complete and utter intellectual and uncensored journalistic independence. We have solidarity today from many national organizations, such as the Emerson Family Foundation, the Fuel Freedom Foundation, the Israel on Campus Coalition, as well as Stand With Us, JNS, the Israeli American Council, EMET, American Association of Jewish Lawyers and Jurists, Scholars for Peace in the Middle East, ZOA Michigan, the Gross Family Center, Americans for Peace and Tolerance, and plenty more. That said, I only speak for myself and for history. Today's episode is sponsored without any preconditions, requests, or stipulations by the Southwest Jewish Congress, which is doing something every day to bring Jews and Christians together in harmony and mutual respect. And I'll see you next month in Dallas. Today, we welcome guests from across America, including our 4 watch parties in the villages, Newton, Mass, Chicago, and Tampa Bay. Overseas, I see lots of viewers logged on from, Australia this time. Again, we have Holland again, France, Italy, Hungary, the Czech Republic, that's new, Germany, Great Britain, Canada, Israel, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, and other countries. If you have a question limited to today's topics, place 1 short sentence in Zoom's QA feature. The Edwin Black Show, along with our YouTube site, is global and fast growing, enjoying many tens of thousands of views. We speak frankly and without partisanship to a fragmented world seeking better understanding of our tormented past, our present very, very tense, and a future still uncertain. And remember, we will not be censored. By the way, stay tuned for my special word of wisdom at the very end of the show. Just before I sign off, we'll get to our always fascinating show, The Ever Opinionated Vintage Boys, in a few minutes after some brief announcements, plus our items from the week. Announcements: at the Edwin Black Show and our companion YouTube site, we have just released 3 newly edited and visually gripping episodes. First, we released a prescient interview with threat analyst Ken Abramowitz, one of the vintage boys you'll see today, and that was recently recorded in the presidential suite at the Tel Aviv Hilton. Ken lays out the frightening facts about the threats facing Israel. We have also released 2 important episodes just a few weeks ago this year, our interview with 4 bold authors about their courageous new books, and then my unanswered questions number 12, which I think is the most compelling one yet. You'll love the production. Finally, we go back and take a deep dive into the John Durham investigation, see the strength of his cases versus the absence of his convictions. See all of these videos and hundreds of others at theedwinblackshow.com or search YouTube for the Edwin Black Show channel. My appearance tour continues across America and overseas. Next month in October, I appear with Empower You of Cincinnati. Then I return to Dallas for an encore presentation at the Embry Human Rights Center at SMU discussing Israel, and a second lecture for the SMU Jewish Studies Department. While I am there in Dallas, I will be live in studio for 90 minutes with the Glenn Beck Show. You won't want to miss it. Before year's end, I expect to be in the Tampa Bay area, and I'm already scheduled into the summer of 2024, most notably a 3-event January series in South Florida with the Gross Family Center for the study of anti-Semitism in the Holocaust. Then in February, a return to Mexico City for a powerful community-wide 4-event series with Yad Vashem. In March of next year, I keynote the Canadian Privacy Conference in Ottawa, and next summer I hope to address the big student convention in Washington, D.C. again. Get details of all my appearances from edwinblack.com/events, where my team has restored scores of event flyers going back to 2011, actually hundreds. There you can see information on my many presentations at universities from Harvard to UCLA and before legislatures, from the British Parliament to the Israeli Knesset, in cities as far-flung as Sydney, Australia, to Brussels, to Jerusalem. It's a powerful reminder to me of my years-long journey to connect with my readers and my viewers, and let us meet up in your city. Now, some major items from the week. Due to our time constraints, I can only cover a few of the many that attracted our attention. We start with the weekly AI update. All right, of the many daily AI threats and developments that we monitor here at the Edwin Black Show, I've selected 2 of the most significant. First, a Chinese chatbot, AI-driven, from the company Tencent, has the real cutesy name of Ernie. But this AI chatbot, Ernie, is already being programmed for censorship. As reported by the BBC, if you ask, quote, why is Xi Jinping not attending the upcoming G20 meeting? Your answer is just a link to the official profile of Xi Jinping. To the question, is it a sign of weakness that the Chinese government has stopped publishing youth unemployment data? The canned reply was, I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer this question yet. And as to the Uyghurs and Tibet, 2 sites of huge oppression, the question is Xinjiang a good place, and is Tibet a good place? The chatbot's answer is, I don't know. We are seeing this trend in real time with Beijing's fake news about the Maui firestorms. Chinese bot forces have claimed the disaster was not natural, but spread via secret, quote, weather weapon being tested by the United States. AI chatbots, which will soon govern all our online information, are being trained to censor and soon to misinform. Reality and factuality will soon be a debatable matter. Remember this, my friends, while you're napping. Items from the week. First, we pause and we look to the heavens and weep for North Africa. Morocco and Libya have both suffered unfathomable hell and heartbreak. Morocco suffered a monster 6.8 earthquake, followed by a 4.9 aftershock near Marrakesh. Some 3,000 are dead, 6,000 injured, and many more homeless, and a multitude of lives have been utterly destroyed. The entire region is vulnerable to earthquakes. In 1960, between 12,000 and 15,000 people were killed when a 5.9 magnitude earthquake struck western Morocco's coastal region. For some strange reason, at this time, Morocco has refused all international assistance, including from Israel, France, Canada, and Germany, only permitting 4 countries to bring in rescue teams, and these include Qatar and Turkey. Sad. We also look at the killer rainstorm Daniel and the fact that it washed away 2 poorly constructed dams in the city of Derna, and this led to a 60-foot wall of water drowning part of that city. The death toll could climb to 20,000, and relief and rescue is severely hampered by two feuding governments that are currently ruling Libya and its diplomatic isolation with its neighbors at Maui and many other disaster locales, and we see a world of tempest, torment, and tears. Think of those whose lives have been vanquished. Item 2, a few hours ago, Ukrainian drones assaulted Russia's vaunted billion-dollar state-of-the-art S-400 air defense in Crimea. First, Ukrainian rocket forces attacked a nearby naval vessel, and when the S-400 engaged it, that revealed its location. The Ukrainian SBU security service sent in cheap drones with signal jammers to disable the Russian radars, and then two Ukrainian Neptune anti-ship missiles were modified to strike the ground facility. This means that when Israel goes against the S-400 in Syria and Iran, the path to destroying them and ruling the skies is now clearly attainable. Item 3, the Biden crime family has finally triggered a formal House impeachment inquiry. This can be compared to a grand jury. In response, the White House actually sent out written instructions to its supportive media to, quote, ramp up their investigations of House members, which I think is shocking. The liberal media is already declaring, quote, there is no evidence, but this is false. There is an abundance of evidence. First, there are more than 150 suspicious activity reports, so-called SARS, S-A-R-S, filed by banks against the web of shell companies operated by the Biden family. This is called direct physical evidence. Second, we have direct testimony by Hunter Biden business associates, such as partner in crime Devin Archer and Tony Bobulinski, that the president directly participated in discussions with corrupt players, whether it was on the phone or at Cafe Milano in Washington. Third, we have senior federal IRS and FBI whistleblowers who have testified they were ordered to go slow and or stop before they even came close to Joe Biden personally or any of his family members. Fourth, we have Joe Biden himself bragging in public that he did get the Ukrainian prosecutor fired on 1 day's notice, and plenty more. All this is called evidence. Now, the evidence must be verified, corroborated, linked to other evidence, and adjudicated. That is the investigative process. With new subpoena powers, the House committees will do just that. Item 4. As is known, Jews everywhere will be observing their solemn religious obligations of the high holy days, that is, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, marked by the supplications to God and apologies for the crimes of all humanity. These 10 days are our most sacred holiday period when Jews fast, pray, reflect, and supplicate to God. Yet everywhere, Jewish leaders and publications are warning Jews to be cautious and alert in the event of terrorism. It has become a sport by anti-Semites to schedule contentious events on the Jewish high holy days, innovated best by the Jew haters connected to the Burlington City Council, which some time ago tried to roll out a BDS vote just before Yom Kippur. Now we see a new source of affliction. The University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, which has chosen the high holidays to sponsor a hate-filled, anti-Jewish, anti-Israel, and pro-terrorist, yes, pro-terrorist conference. One of the lead university sponsors is Wolf Humanities Center. More than $63,200 has been fundraised from more than 650 individuals toward this event. The event will take place near where the Jews are observing their holiday. Look at the list of speakers. Number 1 is the infamous Roger Waters, who wore a Nazi-style and imaged uniform in his Berlin concerts as he continues to insult the Holocaust, Israel, and Jews generally. Joining him, Mark Lamont Hill, who CNN terminated for his remarks calling for the destruction of the Jewish state. The event's executive director is Susan Abu Hawa, who has accused Israel of committing a dozen Kristallnachts, referring to the historic Nazi pogrom carried out against Jews in Germany in November of 1938. Speaker Randa Abdel Fattah has publicly described Israel as demonic and expressed her eager anticipation for the country's downfall. Hawada Araf, another, has labeled the Anti-Defamation League, get this, as a propagator of Jewish supremacy. That's a quote. Her association with the International Solidarity Movement, which I investigated, is well known, and their ties are well known with terrorist groups, which I also investigated. And all of this is raising serious concerns about this conference. All of them called for Palestine to be free from the river to the sea, which means expelling some 10 million Jews. But to where? To the Mediterranean. All this is well known to the four most pivotal people at UPenn, University of Pennsylvania. Let's name them. Liz Magill, president of the university, Chief of Staff Mike Citro, Provost John Jackson, and PR man Ron Ozio. All were invited to appear here, but none replied to the written invitation. These people, the four I mentioned, and their compatriots have conceded that the views of the speakers are anti-Semitic, yet the university continues to sponsor an agent of hate in our society. They will not take action against this hate fest in spite of all the fancy protest letters they have received, many from the likes of the Anti-Defamation League and the local Jewish federations. So now it is time for us to take direct action along the legal channels available. First, the 501c3 tax-exempt status of University of Pennsylvania and the sponsoring Wolf Humanities Center can be challenged, and that will be with a simple letter to the IRS and or the Attorney General of your state. Any litigation under Title VII should be directly naming Liz Magill, President, Chief of Staff Mike Citro, Provost John Jackson, and PR man Ron Ozio. So legal discovery can take place precisely determining what they were discussing with whom when this hate fest was being concocted and authorized, and when they decided to leave it in place. We're going to take swift action against this type of activity. And we note that the university, while allowing this anti-Semitism, has taken other specific measures against what they call hate speech, that some might just call plain political speech. In addition, anyone who wishes to challenge the accreditation of the University of Pennsylvania, that is their right to function as an accredited school, can contact the Middle States Commission on Higher Education, which is headquartered near the campus in Philadelphia. If you have a student studying there, transfer them out. If you have a donor, cancel your donation. UPenn now shoots to the dark top of colleges conducive to anti-Semitism and Jew hatred, and the entire community needs to react. And now for the monologue. We ask, can the Israel we know survive? Who would have thought a year ago that people across the Jewish state and all across the world would ask such a question? The Jewish people have questioned and quarreled during their entire existence, from the moment Jacob wrestled with God at a place now in Jordan called Peniel, whereupon God changed Jacob's name to Israel, which means I contended with God, to the refusal of the Israelites in the desert to accept all that God has offered them, including the smelting of the golden calf, to the kingdom of Israel, splitting into two kingdoms, side by side, that is Israel and Judah, said to be about the 10th century BCE, to the endless argument of the scholars in exile in Babylon, to the joke about the man stranded on a desert island who built 2 synagogues, including one that he could boycott. But now it seems we have irreconcilable differences that must be reconciled, or the future is dim. By now, the Jews of Israel are divided into 2 major camps. Some call it Tel Aviv versus Jerusalem. I call it scooters versus synagogues, or the religious versus the a-religious, or the super cool dudes versus the super traditional one. An affected yeast is starting to rise, where the ultra cool, represented by a vocal and irrepressible minority headquartered in Tel Aviv, are sick of coexisting with supranational and super religious Jews headquartered in Jerusalem. Why the religious Jews are busy slicing challah, the other side is busy slicing jeans and reconstructing molecules. The Tel Avivians have many legitimate complaints. They want to take the train, see movies, and party like there's no tomorrow on the Sabbath. The religious see this as a sacrilege. Yet all the modern Orthodox religious people that I know, and I know many, they all abide by the live and let live principle. When in their home, I abide by their traditions, but they do not impose their beliefs on others like many of the ultra-Orthodox do. They believe in a national, pluralistic Jewish state which allows Jewish values to set the benchmark and the foundation while being acceptant and tolerant of other people of other backgrounds. America is a pluralistic Christian state that welcomes and tolerates others. Just like Italy, France, and most of Europe, Muslim and Arab states apply Islamic principles as their starting point. It is fitting that there is one geopolitical entity for the Jews located in their ancient, authentic homeland. Most importantly, Jews invented, or rather were gifted, with the concept of democracy and justice as they wandered in the desert. That democracy is claimed to be the centerpiece of this argument. The current Bibi Netanyahu group claims that their version of democracy, with American-style checks and balances on a co-equal judicial branch, is better than the left-wing version of democracy, which prefers a bifurcated democracy with an executive and legislative branch on one side, and on the other side, a judicial monarchy that replaces itself in perpetuity. And that's ideal because the judicial monarchy we speak of embodies their liberal ideas. As you know, I've left out about 90% of the details, but it's all come to a crashing and crescendoing denouement this week, just a day or two ago, when the 15 judges heard arguments over the issue of just how reasonable the word reasonable is. During the contentious hearing, the Knesset arguers explained that they had a right to modify basic law, that is Israel's version of a constitution, and the judges said, well, what gives you the right to create the law of the land anyway? The judges and the coalition representatives actually fiercely argued over who had the right to have the right to be right. Let me say that again. They argued over who had the right to have the right to be right. They even argued whether Israel's declaration of independence was binding or just inspirational. The Jew-hating and Israeli-hating controlling fraction of the Democratic Party has already gotten into the act by financing the demonstrations, pricey full-page advertisements, and other expenses. These include the New Israel Fund, George Soros, and others. It has just been revealed that a Washington advisory group, Trident DMG, will provide the main Israel protesting and agitation group known as Blue and White Future with strategic communications services. The contract is for 90 days, $70,000. But according to their Foreign Agents Registration Act, which I checked right here, Trident DMG was founded by Democratic Party strategist Josh Galper, plus former CNN journalist Eleanor McManus, with former Clinton White House Special Associate Counsel Adam Goldberg, and former Clinton lawyer Lanny Davis, Washington boy. And I can tell you, these are Democrats through and through. At the same time, the Blue and White Future is chaired by its CEO, Iran Schwartz, a leader in the demonstrations against Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's judicial reform drive. Other leaders of Blue and White Future include Gilead Sher, who served as chief of staff to Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who was one of the central minds behind this protest, as well as Maya Jacobs, Barak's former spokesperson. Last month, Blue and White Future ran a full-page paid advertisement in the New York Times. Hello, that cost between $75,000 and $200,000. Where's that dough coming from? Now the anti-Israel zealots in the Democratic Party are causing the Joe Biden people who are running the administration to hold back on a meeting with Netanyahu in New York on the sidelines of the UN conference. All this to topple the Bibi regime. They want an Israel without Bibi, and then an Israel without Judaism, and then Judaism without Israel. So where is all this going? No Supreme Court, not in America or Israel, has any army to enforce its will. It only has its moral authority and the cooperation of the executive. Joe Biden and his party have repeatedly shown their willingness to reject the authority and sanctity of the U.S. Supreme Court. They say because they reject its findings. In Israel, Bibi's coalition has defiantly told the court they cannot intrude on the legislative and executive prerogative. The Vintage Boys are supremely qualified to argue this further, and the five assembled have the wisdom and also the wines and the whiskeys needed to opine. I will start with a surprise fluid. I chose not a rye or a scotch, but a mezcal, which is pure agave. Oh boy. Mine is Fidencio Mezcal Artesanal. Not expensive, just $39. But I want to tell you, this is a wild and crazy fluid, a tempest on the senses, hot smoked and distilled twice in an archaic wood-fired alembic to about 44% alcohol by volume. That's ABV. It features very slight dilution and retains the traditional body, sharp grassy notes, and long savory mid-palate of a classic mezcal with a brief hint of citrus at the finish. I promise that no one who ventures into the pre-tequila world of mezcal will enjoy the first sip, but each successive attempt will be enchanting. And here I go.
L'chaim.
Oh my God, that is wild. This is wild. All right, so now I turn the stage over to my friend Ken Abramowitz, who has stepped out of a meeting in Denver. Ken, are you with us? Let's see. Yes, he is. I'm going to elevate you to panelist. Now, while I'm elevating Ken to panelist, I should say that Ken is at a disadvantage. So what were you able to find while you were traveling? Because I know you're at a disadvantage.
So I have in contrast to your pedestrian mezcal, I have a high-end mezcal, more befitting of the people watching this show. So here, let me get it for everybody. See if you can see that. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, that's the illegal. How were you able to find that?
Yeah, I had to search far and wide, but it's very exciting. It's illegal from Mexico, and let me just read something here. It was rated 92 by the wine enthusiasts. It's aged for 13 months in American oak and French oak and bourbon casks. It has the nose of maple, clove, and bitter orange, and it has mellow flavors of dark chocolate, vanilla, smoke, sweet agave on the palate, followed by a full, rich finish. So I can't do better than their description. So here it is.
That's a lot for you. Watch it.
It's very tasty. I haven't had it before, but now I'm an expert in this in mezcals, and I highly recommend it. It's very smooth, and whatever I have left, I have a rented car here. I'll just put in the gas tank here, and then I'll fly right to the airport.
All right, listen, tell us what the heck's going on in Israel. You just came back from there. I interviewed you there. How bad is it?
Yeah. So Israel is both a dictatorship and democracy trying to coexist with each other. So the Supreme Court is a dictatorship, and the Prime Minister and the Knesset are part of the democracy. And the reason there's so much conflict is like having humans and lions in the same room. The Supreme Court acts like a dictatorship, or you call it a monarchy, which is also a good way to characterize it. And they basically run the country. The elected Prime Minister and elected Knesset are basically subservient to the wishes and dictates of the Supreme Court monarchy / dictatorship. This is no way to run a government, and it has to be resolved. Now, the Supreme Court is behind the demonstrations. So the Supreme Court is basically subversive to the Prime Minister and the Knesset and is involved in an illegal coup. In a perfect world, which we don't have, but in a perfect world, everyone of the Supreme Court would be in jail for treason and conspiracy.
Now, wait a minute. You're making some pretty strong statements about the well-revered judicial branch of the Israeli government.
Yeah, that's right. And I hate to do it because I hate to watch mini civil wars. The question is, who's going to blink? I'm hoping, but it's just my hope, that the Supreme Court blinks and realizes that it's better to share power like every other Supreme Court in the world and not be in a dictatorship. But dictatorships don't usually give up easily. So this will be the moment of truth over the next 2 weeks of whether who plays chicken and who gives up first. Hopeful, just because I'm an optimistic type person, I'm hopeful that the two sides come to an amicable agreement because it's a repeat of the Josephus book. Israel surrounded by bad guys, in particular Iran and its octopus of friends, and Israel should be focusing on its enemies, not focus on a friendly fight among Jews.
All right, well, that's an interesting perspective and a little bit more on the edge than I expected. Now, I can tell you that although I've heard the Supreme Court battling back and saying, you don't have the right to tell us what to do, we have the right to tell you what to do, I think they're just staking out their positions of authority, because I get the feeling that they feel that, this is going to sound crazy, the reasonableness legislation is actually reasonable and not unreasonable enough. Ken, I know you're working on your board meeting there. Let me go to our next great speaker. Let me go to Shel Unsdorfer, president of Likud UK. And Zalmi, what the heck are you drinking? And what is your opinion of what the heck is going on?
So what I have here is I spent a couple of weeks in Spain. And so this is a special edition tequila, 15-year-old Scotch whiskey, which has been matured in agave tequila casks. Now, I discovered reading the bottle, because I used to have this amazing admiration for Josh, my good friend here, Josh London, because he used to talk about the notes and the flavors and the whole thing. And I found that it's written on the back of the bottle. Okay, and all he was doing was reading off of the back of the bottle. Now this says, that we have creme brulee, notes of ripe pineapple, creme brulee, mixed nuts and light oak, and it has a nose rich on the palate, bursting with flavors of caramelized agave, toasted almonds, baked apples with custard and warming spice. Now, I mean, I had no idea, but I'm gonna have it. So 15 years old, it waited for me. I'm just going to pour a little bit and say l'chaim with you.
All right.
L'chaim to all our guests. Should have a Shana Tova and an amazing year.
Shana Tova to all. By the
So
way,
basically,
we did not coordinate this tequila action.
no.
I really can't believe you picked up a tequila cask whiskey. That's amazing,
Isn't
Zalmi.
it? Yeah. Anyway, Ken, I have an enormous respect for Ken because he wrote this amazing book, The Multi-Front War, and we are actually now facing this multi-front war. Everybody expects there to be a multi-front war, not least because Israel's precarious position and the Arabs, particularly Hezbollah and Iranian sponsors, believe that Israel is weak right now. So there's no moment that a book has found like Ken's multi-front war book. But he mentioned something very interesting, which I have mentioned several times, and he mentioned Josephus. Josephus, and I have this over 100-year-old book called The Antiquities of the Jews of Flavius Josephus, who was a Jewish son of a Kohen in the time of the Second Temple and in Rome. And he recorded that the Roman generals, having laid siege to Jerusalem, saw the Jews killing themselves inside the temple walls and said, let's wait out here and see them kill themselves. And then when they finish killing themselves, we'll take over the city. Okay. I'm sorry if my picture is kind of blurred. I don't know why, but it may be the scotch. In any event, Ken is right. This is history repeating itself. Okay. And from my point of view, there are two prongs to this protest movement. Okay. One prong is the secular. The secular have seen in this last election that they are losing traction in Israeli politics, and that they will never really be elected again because they're not making any more babies. The babies that are being born are babies in the religious Zionist camp and in the Haredi camp and so forth, and they're losing. Their last bastion of influence is the Supreme Court, which, as Ken says, is an absolute tyranny. Okay, but the other prong of this is the political. So you have Ehud Barak, who is probably the shortest serving prime minister in Israel's history, who is viscerally jealous of Bibi Netanyahu, his former underling in the Sayeret Matkal, who is the longest serving prime minister in Israel's history. So he is so consumed by jealousy that he will even go to sedition in order to try and overthrow Bibi. So he is one of the prime movers of this, and some of the statements that he has been found to make, and there are recordings of rivers of blood and so forth, are disgusting. And we also see the other political side of it is Yair Lapid, who just simply, he's not really, he understands that the Supreme Court is anti-democratic. There are videos of him saying that the Supreme Court is anti-democratic. I mean, you know what? Even Ben-Gurion said that the Supreme Court was anti-democratic. Okay, I have a quote from him, which I put on my website. So the likes of Yair Lapid is just trying to overthrow the Bibi Netanyahu popularly elected government. And he was found only in the last day or so having recruited Balad, which is an Arab party. But the leader of Balad, the Arab party in the Knesset, accused Lapid of trying to recruit Arabs to demonstrate with the anti-reform demonstrators. So really, this is little to do with democracy, but it's about power. It's about keeping the secular in power, and it's about getting rid of Bibi. So maybe we need a Cromwell in this equation. History repeats itself all the time. The old adage: if we fail to learn the lessons of history, we are doomed to repeat it. On that note, whether it's caramel, creme brulee, or custard, that's my statement.
All right, L'chaim. And I should say that I think that you drank a little bit too much of that glass because your camera is a little blurry-eyed right now. You mentioned two things I took a note. You said that Barak is behind a lot of this, and Ehud Barak, who you said was the shortest prime minister, were you referring to his height, or are you referring to the time that he spent as the prime minister?
Actually, Bennett is the shortest, but Barak was, I think, the second shortest in time. Okay. And it's very sad because he's a highly decorated soldier, but he just messed it up in his later life, which goes to show that soldiers should stay soldiers and never go into politics.
All right, so you said that Barak made disgusting remarks, and we have recorded those disgusting remarks on one of my last shows, and that's being edited in. But what he said was they know that they are a vocal minority, and they apparently have reviewed the science of the political science, which they quote constantly, and we have the quotes, that if only 3.8% of the population consistently protest, the government will fall. And you know, and I know that we have the tape, which we're publishing soon, where he says, oh, I can be prime minister again when the rivers are running with blood, and that blood will be of Jews. So I'm very, very sad about that.
When history repeats itself, I just ask you to remember one name here, guys. Korach, from biblical times. Ehud Barak is a modern day, latter day Korach. And he's going to go down the same way. He's going to go down in the ground where he belongs.
Well, when you talk about Korach, you're talking about the guy who led the opposition to Moses, correct? But
Yeah.
What's interesting is his descendants became some of the greatest cantors.
Yes.
And I'll have you know that my granddaughter is named Cora because in the tradition of those cantors. So it's kind of a split decision. All right. Thank you very much. We're going to get back to you. Our next speaker who's going to talk about this is going to be, I believe it's going to be Jeff. Now, Jeff, if you've been drinking already, what are you doing?
I'm in the middle of my harvest. This is Jonathan Haydu, winemaker here. We're dealing with like grapes and juice, and Jonathan asked me a question about acidity, and I'm saying it tastes pretty good. What's the problem?
All right. Now, before you say another word, I should tell people that Jeff is the president of Covenant Wines, and Covenant Wines are the best kosher wines on either side of the Atlantic. What are you drinking, and what is your complaint?
All right. Sorry. Thank you for explaining who I am. And so great to be on this show again. By the way, what am I drinking? You know, I don't really even like tequila, although I'd like to try what you're drinking, Saul. That looked pretty interesting. But I was confused. You said it's a Scotch tequila. I don't quite get that. But anyway, you explain that.
I think what he meant was it was Scotch in tequila cask.
Scotch and tequila cask. Okay, that's good. That's
all right, good.
So what I'm drinking, I've gone back to wine. Last time I drank way too much Scotch, and I staggered out of this podcast.
We all know that. We all know that. Go ahead.
I'm trying to keep it together, at least till I finish my little talk here. I'm drinking bubbly because I'm drinking the one we make here at Covenant Blanc de Blanc, because you know what? I don't think the Jews drink enough bubbly to celebrate the new year. And I am strongly recommending that in addition to all the spirits that we love to drink, celebrate with bubbly, preferably mine if you can find it. And if not, somebody else's, but it's a great way to start off the new year. Okay, I just want to preface my spiel by saying that, as everybody knows, I'm a Democrat, I'm a lefty, these guys, y'all put up with me. It's very sweet of you to do that. But what I'm going to say basically is just the opposite what everybody else is saying. However, the great thing is that we all want to get to the same place. And that is kind of where I'm going to end up. So I am issuing a call to centrism. Both the far right and the left have created an unprecedented rift in the Jewish and the non-Jewish state alike. At fault is a profound ignorance of history and misunderstanding of current events backed by a blind allegiance to a rigid perspective of right and wrong. Let's start with Israel. In their pursuit of a secure and more Jewish state, Israeli extremists like Knesset Speaker Amir Ohana, who would eviscerate any system of checks and balances, or so-called Justice Minister Yariv Levin, whom I would refer to as the Minister of Injustice, or Shas Party Chairman Aryeh Dehi, who was convicted only 3 times of criminal offenses, and wackadoodle Heritage Minister Amichai Eliyahu, who says he has no trust in Israel's legal system, especially when it finds a Jew guilty of murder. And of course, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who seems to be doing his best to destroy Israel's economy. And finally, Israel's anything but security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir. All these guys are actually cleaving Israel in two. They are isolating Israel from the rest of the world, and they are sabotaging the economy and creating the opposite of security for Israelis. I believe in a united Israel. Let's see. Sorry, I lost my place here, guys, because I've had 2 glasses of champagne.
Wait a minute. When did you start drinking?
When you started talking.
All right, go ahead.
So, I believe in a united Israel that includes the so-called West Bank. But we can't do that by alienating more than half the Jews in Israel, those who have actively fought and sacrificed for the state, as well as anyone else who might want to be an ally. My suggestion is to put these misguided and dangerous Knesset guys on the front lines in defense of the nation. Maybe let's put them in Gaza or on the Lebanese border. Let them be soldiers, but keep them out of government. Okay, almost done. To the young, woke American Democrats who support BDS, anti-Israel politicians and anti-Israeli organizations, I say, get an education and learn why from the river to the sea really means, oh, let's just have another Holocaust. And to the far right, and even not so far right Republicans who support a corrupt American Supreme Court, continuing alienation for anyone who disagrees with them, and blind some more support for an obviously deranged, dishonest, criminal, sexual predator, and presidential contender. If you don't know what I'm talking about, well, you're delusional. I also say, get an education, use your brains, and stop blindly worshiping conspiracy theories, and stop acting like babies. You can't always get what you want, as a famous rock star once said. Nobody can govern without honest dialogue. Life and politics are more successful with compromise. So to the misguided Bibi worshippers and his acolytes who would destroy Israel in order to save it, I say, keep my religion and your religion out of politics. Israelis have fought hard to build the modern day Jewish state. Only a united Jewish people can preserve it.
Wow. Well, that was, I'm glad you let us know how you really feel. And I would just say that this is not quite as unhinged as your last presentation, but I'm going to have what he's drinking on New Year's Eve. Send me over a bottle of that. So we're going to bring in the president of the ZOA Michigan, which is the best unit of the ZOA. We're going to bring in Shel Freilich. Now, Shel, after you heard what our friend Jeff said and what others have said, you could probably wrap this whole thing up in about 3 hours. I'm giving you 4 minutes. Go ahead. Tell us what you're drinking and what's on your mind.
Thank you, Edwin. First of all, I'd like to echo what Jeff said with his last sentence, unity amongst the Jewish people. And I want to wish a l'chaim and a good, healthy year for all of us, for our families, and for Israel and the Jewish people throughout the world. L'chaim. What I am drinking is Rifle Rye. Rifle Rye. This is the astoundingly rich flavors of Rifle Rye demonstrate how much whiskey lovers revere rye whiskey. This is truly a rye sensation. It's produced by Alberta Distillers, the world's leading producer of rye grain in Canada. If you're a rye connoisseur and you've enjoyed Whistle Pig rye, Masterson's, Jefferson's, Lock, Stock, Barrel, all those ryes have come from Alberta Distillers in Calgary, Alberta. As the late American distilling legend Dave Pickerel put it, Alberta Distillers is not only the world's leading producer of rye, it's the best. This is a really phenomenal rye. It's only available in our northern neighbor, Canada, not available in the US, not available in the UK. However, US distribution is hinted at. It's a 90% rye, made of 90% rye, matured in new oak barrels and ex-bourbon barrels. And it's beautifully structured, a wonderful mingling of rye spice, has notes of clove, cinnamon. The rye just lingers in your mouth and the top of your mouth. It's a wonderful rye whiskey. For those who are going to Canada, go to the local government liquor stores and buy a bottle or two or three and bring it back to wherever you are, the UK or the USA. A couple comments I want to make. Israeli judicial reform is a challenge. As Zalmi said, Israeli leaders have voiced the need for reform. The late Yitzhak Rabin was prime minister, and he said that the Supreme Court needs to be reformed. So it's been discussed amongst the Israeli leaders for 30 years plus. But we've got a dense fog of media misinformation swirling around all the issues. For example, many saying that Army reservists are refusing to serve. Well, according to the Israel Defense and Security Forum, made up of 16,000 senior reserve officers and commanders, not one Army reservist has refused when they're called up and report. Not one has refused to report. You have a lot of falsehoods swirling around. As far as Jeff was talking about, the government was voted in with 64 Knesset seats, and they had something like 70 or 72% of the Jewish vote that voted them in. Clear majority. As Zalmi was talking about in terms of the cultural differentiation, the protesters represent the secular Ashkenazis in society, and they're concerned about the Supreme Court, the mainstream, the media has been their power, and they're seeing their power slip away. The majority of the government is represented not just Orthodox, but also National Zionist, and also Mizrahi and Sephardim. Mizrahi and Sephardim are those from Jews that descended from Spain, and also Mizrahi, those in the East. That segment is now the majority of the population in Israel, and that's why they voted in that government. So it's the government that's representing the majority of the Jews in Israel. I've full confidence in Israeli voters. They'll surely address the need of judicial changes for their country, undoubtedly. One other point I want to just turn to, and then I'll close out. We have to remember the daily threats to the people's survival in Israel from its enemies. It's not judicial reform. Yes, there's dissension in Israel amongst Israelis. They need to be unified. Jeff was correct. But it's the threats to their survival that's coming. Did you know that in the first 6 months of this year, there's been over 3,600 attacks against Israel's? That's an average of 20 terrorist attacks every single day. They include one stabbing every 10 days, one shooting attack every other day, 4 firebomb attacks each day. And when I say firebombs, that's when a terrorist fills a bottle with a gasoline and a rag, lights it on fire, and throws the flaming bottle at the nearest Jew in the hope that it'll explode and burn the victim alive. And these current wave of terrorist attacks are part of the Palestinian Authority's strategy of popular resistance. They call them heroic acts. And for some reason, the world just ignores all these ongoing attacks. Where's the money that's fueling all these attacks? Edwin wrote about this in Financing the Flame. The U.S. sends $400 million annually in tax dollars to the PA regime that pays lifetime pensions to Arabs who slaughter Jews and Americans. The more killed, the higher the annual pension. And this financing is contrary to U.S. law. The PA regime routinely radicalizes Arabs in Judea, Samaria, and throughout Israel to be anti-Zionist and to attack Jews. An eye-popping $6 billion. Wouldn't you like to have $6 billion? $6 billion was recently given to Iran by U.S. government, which enabling Iran to finance even more terrorism in Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza. And of course, Iran is pouring money and weapons to the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, for Hamas, Palestinian Jihad, and the Palestinian Authority to finance these terror rampages against innocent Israeli citizens. So I'm going to conclude with two thoughts. Palestinian Arab terrorism against Israel is nothing less than a war that is being waged against the Jewish state and its people every day. A war that no other country in the world would tolerate if it were the target. Why are enlightened countries continuing to fund these reprehensible terror acts?
Well, your remarks are very well taken and measured as always. While you were talking, Zalmi sent me the exact quote from David Ben-Gurion, which I'm going to read, and it was recently quoted by the Wall Street Journal. Quote, imagine for yourselves, this is Ben-Gurion, that the nation wants something, and 7 people designated with the rank of judge cancel something that the nation wants. So that it just strikes right to the basis of your remarks, Sal's remarks, Shelley's remarks, what I was saying, just a little shtickle of what Jeff was trying to say. And now for our last panelist, we're going to go to Josh London, who was in Washington in the legislative sphere, and now he's in London. And I want to say why we hold Josh last. It's too embarrassing to follow him because he's driving us nuts. He's got tasting, he's got sensations, he's got nasal effects. Just do it, Josh. Tell us what you're drinking and what is your opinion?
All right. So first off, I'm drinking a classic Lagavulin 16. There's nothing on the back label of any note. Just as a quick aside, by the way, Zalmi, whenever there's notes included on a bottle or in a box or in any of the official packaging, that's marketing shtick. It may or may not be accurate, and it may or may not reflect some version of reality, but it's designed to sell punters. So just keep that in mind. I'm not knocking it, but just understand the source. But in any event, Lagavulin 16, I say it's a classic. By definition, it was marketed as one of the classic malts back in the 80s. So it's one of the original progenitors of the single malt craze as an official thing outside of Scotland. But it is, in fact, a classic whiskey and a brilliant whiskey. It's really stunning. Easy to find. I recommend everyone run out and get it if you haven't had it, or if you haven't had it recently, get it. It's only 43% alcohol by volume, so it's not too pungent as these things go, but it's pungent. Massive, smoky Islay peat, but a dryness unlike any of the other whiskeys from the island, from Islay. A lot of aromatic complexity, and it just deepens. A little bit of water will deepen it even a bit more, but it's incredibly complex, well integrated with. The first thing that always hits me is Lapsang Souchong and Earl Grey tea notes. Just riveting, really enchanting. Particularly Lapsang Souchong really gives a tremendous amount of depth. Iodine, brine, and then you hit marmalade and toffee and figs and vanilla. It really just kind of takes off the whole realm of sweet spices with intermittent charcoal and kind of smoked meat notes dancing in and out of focus. Really, really stunning, really beautiful. It follows perfectly on the palate, which I've been drinking all through the last hour. But it gives you a lot of additional heft. It's oily, almost velvety delivery, powerful, hugely concentrated. better in many ways than many of the other Islas, although I'm a fan of all of them. And there's actually not even my favorite of the Islas, but it has a little bit more class than my favorite Lafroig. But it's a great example where the smoke and the peat does not dominate, even though it's the most forward aspect of it, but it doesn't dominate the other flavors. Once you kind of acclimatize your nose to it and get your palate accustomed, then you quickly realize the smoke is just kind of a canvas, like a painter's canvas, where all the other elements come into play, and you just get this beautiful like expression of the water of life from Isla. It's lovely, l'chaim. So that puts me in the mood for all the rest of this stuff. So what can I add to what everyone else has already said? So I would just a couple of notes I would kind of add in. I tend to agree with most of what's been said here by a lot of my fellow panelists. I probably agree with Jeff more than he would think, which is not to say that much, but nonetheless more than he probably thinks. And I do think that ultimately there's a tremendous failing by the political class across the board here, even though I do sympathize much more with the government than with the protesters. But at the end of the day, this government is really, in Israel, has lots of flotsam and jetsam in it, folks who really shouldn't be wielding the power that they wield, but for consequences that Bibi made earlier in the chain of events, and that the opposition made in forswearing any possibility of getting into bed with Bibi politically. So this is the coalition that resulted. That's that. It's as simple as that. If anywhere along the way any of the so-called moderates wanted to moderate Bibi, he probably would still do it, right, if they were willing. And you could change the whole equation like that. But their lines in the sand and the blood's in the water, and they're committed to what they're committed to. The hard left are the real villains here. If there is a villainous side to it, they're the ones who are really pitted. And much of the protest movement are not of the hard left. They are in for it because they've been roped in. And at the end of the day, nobody wants to be a fascist, right? In America, the tribalism fell apart in part because the politics had gotten so awful that it was a moment for Trump, that the tribal elements had basically said, we're up for the fight. We're proud deplorables, right? Basket of deplorables. They were proudly in it. They were happy to be called fascists or any other, whatever nonsense. And they were happy for the fight, whatever form it took. They wanted Trump. He let him down in many respects, but they wanted a vicious knockdown, drag out battle. In Israel, they didn't want that. They wanted reform. Not everyone wanted reform, but most of the folks who voted for that government understood what was on the table. What they didn't understand was that while they weren't paying close attention, all of a sudden to have voted for reform means that you're a fascist. Well, that's not what most Israelis want. So the protest movement is metastasizing with lots of elements that are not hard left, they're not hard right. They're people who kind of want life to go back to normal, and they recognize that it's now a game of chicken. And as I say, the blood's in the water, and most people are kind of voting on the side that the coalition will fall apart, the government will fail. Because historically, no Israeli government lasts its full term, right? The odds are it will fail. But the best that will hopefully come out of this is somebody else will blink, and they'll come up with something better than what the alternative would have been. Government's not going to get its way 100%. Hopefully it'll get its way partially, and then they can move on to something else. We'll see. It's up to the Supreme Court to decide how much to escalate at this point. That's where the things lie. The official protest folks, the professionals, they never give up, right? They never slumber. They never sleep. That's the nature of the hardcore left in that country, in the United Kingdom, in the United States. It's the nature of the international left. That's what they do. That's what they've always done. And the other folks who get into bed with them sometimes don't realize these are true believers. Right? They don't always recognize who they're getting into bed with because they don't think of it in those terms. Right? They're not. No one's forced them to sign a dotted line with Mephistopheles. They don't think of it that way, even though in some respects that's actually what it is. So I despair quite a bit about how this is all going to play out. if Zalmi's correct that the opposition here is Korach, keep in mind that that only ended because God Himself caused the ground to open up and swallow them. Right? That was a miracle. Right? Maybe it'll happen. I don't. I'm an Orthodox Jew, but I don't put my trust and trade in stock in miracles. I presume God wants us to sort it out. We made a hash of it so far. We'll see what happens. I do put my trust in some things, and ultimately, I agree with Jeff that and as others have said that achdut, right, that unity. It's the Hebrew word for unity. That achdut, the unity of the Jewish people, is really what's needed long term for Israel to survive, the proposition of the Jewish people, the Jewish state to survive. Whether or not this hinders it, stymies it, furthers it, remains to be seen. I do have trust ultimately in my people, in the Jewish people. Whether or not it happens in the near term and before things get really messy, I don't know. God forbid an exogenous factor could snap everyone's minds out of this reverie of nonsense. I shouldn't say nonsense, though I have very important issues at play as well that they've punted for 75 years. So that gives an idea how difficult they are to solve, right? In the Gemara, in the Talmud, the Jewish tradition, when things get so bad, you say, teku, right? You just hit pause and go, the Messiah will tell us what will be. Well, this ultimately is of that sort, except no one is committed to the idea that we'll wait and see. They want to win. We'll see what happens. God forbid an outside factor like in the Iranian aggression or something else along those lines will snap people out of things. Other factors, as I say, if at any point someone in the so-called opposition, that's moderate, at any point they can swoop in, help change the nature of the coalition, and the political dynamics that everyone's got their back against the wall could change. I don't foresee it happening, but it could happen. Any number of things could happen. So I put my trust ultimately in the Jewish people and the collective wisdom over time, and my trust that that this will help me cope with the news that I see. And God willing, it'll be sorted in my lifetime. And until then, I have this to salve my wounded sense of propriety. L'chaim, tovim, l'shalom. And you've
L'chaim, I'm going to bring in Zalmi in a second, but I just want to ask you a straight question. First of all, I loved your remarks. Thank you very much. A straight question. A U.S. president once remarked to an adverse Supreme Court ruling, you have your order. Now go ahead and enforce it. What happens if the Supreme Court says, hey, and the executive branch, BB and company, justified or not, in their mind, say, no, we're not doing it? What happens then?
Well, it's a real problem, and it's foreseeable. It could very well play out that way. We've already, some of the elements are already on record, right, as saying that if there's a choice between the Supreme Court ruling and this government, from the various security chiefs forward, they've all basically said they'll stick with whatever the Supreme Court, whatever's deemed legal by the Supreme Court. Now, nothing ever plays out black and white quite like that, but they've made clear, the chiefs, they've made clear where their allegiance lies. So in a constitutional crisis, it doesn't bode well for the government. On the other hand, if missiles are flying and they have hours to make a decision about retaliation, and people are going to sit there and go, well, no, you're not legitimate because the government, blah, 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 that's going to be a real problem. And I'm not so sure that at that moment that security chiefs are going to sit there and go, well, I got to worry about my bureaucratic seat rather than whether or not Tel Aviv goes up in flames.
Zalmi, give me what you want to say in 30 seconds. Go ahead.
I totally back up what Josh says. At the end of the day, we are one nation, in Israel. And at the end of the day, if there are external threats, we will come together. But this is a pivotal moment in the history of Israel, and we will come through it. We will survive. And whatever the Arabs have plans for us, we will overcome.
And you know something? That's what I have felt too. Now, listen, we're drowning in questions here. So I'm going to ask for 30 seconds. The first guy from the Watch Party in the Villages says, so what can people do about the University of Pennsylvania and campuses like that? First of all, we have to understand that the University of Pennsylvania, which is the recipient of a great deal of American tax assistance, this campus must be called out, and we have to start the effort now to reverse the trend there.
Excuse me, Edwin. I think that these universities, the ones like CUNY and so forth, they are getting a huge amount of Jewish money. And the Jewish money is funding this disgusting anti-Semitism on campus. That's what needs to be stopped.
Well, I agree with you, but it's not just the Jewish philanthropy. We also need to attack their, and I see that you swallowed your liquor because your camera just got clear. So, but we need to challenge their tax-exempt status. We need to call them out for what they are. They aren't in a shining ivory tower. They're down in the ditch with the Jew haters. And I just want to remind everybody that there isn't one genocide that I ever studied in the past 200 years did not begin on the academic campus. Let's go to the watch party in Newton, Mass. This is for Zalmi. Wow. It's about the Loch Ness Monster. Everybody's talking about Scotland and Scotch. Let's talk about the Loch Ness Monster. I'm going to answer first. Some years ago, when the University of Chicago and the Field Museum decided to do a major investigation of the Loch Ness Monster at Loch Ness, I traveled to Loch Ness. I was there for quite a while. It's very appropriate that I comment here. I'm the only guy in America who has not only been to Drummendrachet, I'm the only guy who can pronounce the name correctly. Not correct, Zalmi? How did I do?
Very good.
Drummendrachet. So that's at the bottom of Loch Ness. And here's how it ties in to our thing. If you want to see the Loch Ness Monster, I promise you can see it. You just need to come out of the pub at about 5 o'clock and have a drink, a little scotch in your hand, and out comes Lachi. But I should also say, listen here, folks, it takes 50 members of the species, of the herd, to survive, and it takes 500 to continue their stock. And so biologists and zoologists call this the 5,500 rule. And if there were 50 to 500 of Loch Ness monsters swimming around there, we would see more than blurry-eyed pictures. Now, you're the closest person on this show to the Loch Ness Monster. We're not including Josh. So what do you personally know, having been to Scotland, about the Loch Ness Monster?
Okay, so this T-shirt, okay, you see this? 30 years old, Stephen, matured in the lap of luxury. Okay, smooth, sherried, and smoky. You get that?
Yeah.
So we went up for my son's 30th birthday up to Scotland, and we went to visit all the distilleries. But like good Jews, okay, we took up schmaltz herring.
Oy, oy, oy.
And when you go to the distilleries in Scotland, and I tell all the people on your audience here, when you go up to Scotland, they will give you samples of the greatest whiskeys out of the casks, okay? But it doesn't taste like anything unless you have schmaltz herring with the Scotch, because non-Jews don't understand this, okay? But we do. So we took up schmaltz herring and Scotch, and we tasted all of the malts. And I would suggest that everybody does the same thing. Americans, please come to Scotland, come see the distilleries, and bring your schmaltz herring.
All right, so I come to you next. We're going up there. I don't care what. I'm not leaving the UK until we run up to Scotland. We'll stop at Drummendrachet, and we'll go to the Cafe Urquhart. Hello, I know the lay of the land, and you'll bring your schmaltz herring. Now we're not going to be able to get all the question, guys. I can't go 2 hours. So Morris Herzliya wants to know this. Why should Orthodox Jews not have to serve in the army and get paid for praying? Josh London.
It's not the question isn't exactly correct. It's Haredim not Orthodox. There's many Orthodox Jews who very proudly serve and have. There's a long tradition of military service by religious Zionists and others. There's a very small amount of Haredim that do too. But ultimately, they shouldn't get an exemption. But you have
Let
to.
me just interrupt. When you said Haredi, you mean the guys in the black hats?
Well, so even that's a mix. There's some black hats that do serve very proudly, and some that don't. Haredi, by Haredi, I mean the people who are much more rejecting of modernity, the ones who tend to disassociate themselves from the Zionist state. They tend to think of it a little bit like the Ottoman Turks, just happens to be a Jewish government, and they don't want a part of it, and their politicians actively seek to carve out space for them as well as get subsidy. Now, at the end of the day, they do that because that's what they've always done. That's how they've survived, pre-Holocaust, and that's what the nature of those particular forms of Orthodoxy have always done. But they also adapt to reality. Right? When they used to get pushed into the Tsar's army, some escaped and some served, even though it was difficult. The Haredim are no different. Humans adapt. What they need to do in Israel is figure out some way of forcing the Haredim to cope with the harsh realities upon them. Because particularly as they continue to demographically increase, there's going to be a point at which they need to serve, or there literally will be no one to protect them. It's as simple as that. The leadership have failed the challenge on this front. There's many other ways in which the leadership is brilliant. All sorts of religious things that are magnificent for them. Politically, they have failed their constituencies in a big way. The Zionist communities, religious, non-religious, whatever, they have not dealt with it appropriately. Sometimes the rhetoric is okay, but the policies never are. They always sell out. Ultimately, if they force some new change on the Haredim, they will adapt. It won't be pretty, it won't be easy, but they will adapt because that's what they've always done to survive.
And you were very correct about the misnomer of this question, because it's not Orthodox. And it's not even the ultra-Orthodox, if I could use that bizarre term. It's actually the Haredim, specifically cultish type of black hats. It's not that they're holier than thou, in my opinion, just their hat is bigger than thou. And that's about all that is. Now, listen, guys, I've got 20 questions here. I can't answer it, so I'm sorry. I have another bottle. Shel shamed me into buying this glass. And what I'm going to be drinking now for our bracha is I'm going to be drinking double-edged sword from Jeff. Now, Jeff, this is not 57-50-78. It's 57-77. I deliberately chose the older one. What's the difference?
So 5777, by the way, you're not allowed to put vintage on spirits in America. I don't know, in the UK you can or not. That's why everything is 30-year-old, 20-year-old, 16-year-old. But you never see what year the spirit was made. But we have a special dispensation, okay? Because as Jews, we're special, right? We know this. And
I heard, yeah.
Yes. And so all of my brandies are vintage designated with the Hebrew year. So we call it batch, okay? Batch 50, whatever, 5877, whatever, because you know what? I got to put the year of my brandy that we made it. It's made a certain year, and then we age it for several years in our wine casks. So Ed, you are drinking the first vintage of the double-edged sword.
Oh, goodness.
Which is a brandy of Chenin Blanc. And I'm so honored that you would do that to ring in the new year. That's actually a better choice than the Covenant Blanc de Blanc. I'm going, right after this, I'm going to get a bottle of the brandy too. I'm going to drink that. I'm going to drink myself into a real stupor. Thank you for that inspiration.
All right. Zalmi, give us the bracha, saying goodbye to this year and looking forward to something better. Give it to us.
Well, you asked me about my shofar.
Yeah, do you have a chauffeur?
Boy, do I have a
Oh, that little thing?
I have
All
a
right.
chauffeur here.
All
It's
right,
like,
go ahead.
it's like a massive chauffeur. I don't even know. After all this drinking, I'm not even sure if I can blow this thing, but let me try it.
All right, let me show you how it's done. I'll bring in my little one right
Oh
here.
my God. Wow.
Let me just bring in this. Okay.
Tana Bob Jerusalem.
All right.
Yeah,
All right.
I
That's
agree.
it. Listen,
I agree, Sheldon. I agree.
I hope everybody got that little thing there that I did. All right. Look, we're out of time. I got to read my thing.
That's late. It's next year in Jerusalem.
All right. Next year in
Amen.
Jerusalem.
Amen,
All right.
amen.
We're out of time, so hold for my closing word of wisdom. Just 1 minute away. Don't run anywhere. But first, I want to thank my esteemed, wonderful friends and vintage boys, Jeff Morgan in San Francisco, Ken Abramowitz at the moment in Denver, Shel Freilich, it's Freilich in Detroit, and our 2 London members, Zalmi Unsdorfer and Josh London. I also thank my talented international team, including Sims in South Africa, Carol in Maryland, she's right here, Virginia in New Jersey, and Rebecca in the Philippines for their outstanding work, as well as many others in numerous additional cities around the world. My team, each of them is comprised of very dedicated people. I and we all owe them. I'll see everyone back here either in 1 or 2 weeks. You want to be a friend of the Edwin Black Show? Go to the edwinblackshow.com/support. Keep me independent. You want to hear me in person? Watch my website for events. I'm in Dallas next month. Consult my events page at edwinblack.com. Until then, head over to any Barnes & Noble in the USA or any Amazon, Walmart, Apple, or Kobo platform in 190 countries across this roiling, toiling, boiling planet, where you can find any of my 200 book editions, such as IBM and the Holocaust, soon to be a major Hollywood blockbuster. God should grant that the strike goes away. I'll be back in 2 weeks, by the way. If you want an autographed copy, hit my personal newly designed website. Wes did it. Thank you, Wes. edwinblack.com and click books. Get access alerts to participate live in future shows at the edwinblackshow.com. You'll see a much enhanced and exquisitely produced version of this show and prior episodes by subscribing to our YouTube channel at the edwinblackshow.com and hit the notification button like tens of thousands of others have. You'll love them. We put new ones up each week, produced by a bold international crew. Follow me at Edwin Black Book on that thing that they now call X, as well as Facebook. And now, for my closing word of wisdom, with courage and conviction, even the smallest of the small can stand amongst the tallest of the tall. Thank you, world. I'm zooming out. Bless everybody. Happy New Year, Shana Tova.